Thank you. I'm very honored to be here today and to bring the good news of Jesus Christ to you and to preside at the table. Well, we're on week 3 of the celebration. 3 weeks ago, we gathered in this place. I'm sure every seat was filled. There was an excitement that filled this room. And you shouted, "Christ is risen." And you responded, "He is risen indeed. Alleluia." And the music was bold and the celebration went on. It didn't stop there, did it? Last week, we gathered here again, and we heard the story, that powerful story of Jesus appearing to his disciples who were locked away in a room. They were frightened. They weren't sure what would happen next to them. And then Jesus appears, saying, "Peace be with you." And we know the great story attached to that. One of the disciples who left the building because he had to move on with life, we call him Thomas, had a natural response when the other disciples told him, "We saw Jesus." He said, "I don't believe you." The same way you and I would respond if someone said, "I saw Jesus." No, you didn't. So we learned last week that Jesus meets us in our doubts. He meets us in those cold, dark places when we close the door to our hearts. Jesus breaks in to those places. Well, we're on week 3 of the celebration. It continues. This week, the disciples have courage. Peter finally says, "I'm going fishing." Good, he's recovering from his grief. He's ready to move on with his life. Well, so the other disciples follow with. Can you imagine, and maybe some of you can relate really well to this because it's happened to you, where you had expectations of one job. You know, the disciples were following a rabbi. They left their old job as fisher people. They left, they resigned, put the nets away. They were going to follow this rabbi. Very honorable profession. But what happens? This rabbi gets killed. Now what do you do in life? They had to make a decision. And maybe some of you have had a job in mind, or you had a career and suddenly it was dashed. And you had to take maybe a different job, or you had to go back. And you know that sense of maybe slight humbling, a little bit of humiliation. Can you imagine what the disciples felt that first night going back to the boats, and then you see all your former colleagues? And of course, you know they were all good Scandinavians. They wouldn't say anything. But you know what they were thinking. You know, see who's back. And then, insult doesn't get worse here. Then they're out fishing. Their first night back, and guess what happens? They catch no fish. Zero, zippo, nada. And then this man standing on the beach goes, "Hey, children, did you catch anything?" And if you've ever been on a lake, you know how things echo. You know, just a little insult to that injury. And you feel their pain, and you're going, you can hear them going, "No, didn't catch anything." And then, you know, these are professionals. They're professional fishermen. They had thrown their nets out to the left side of the boat. Strategic reason, I bet you never thought about this. Because, okay, if this is the left side of your boat, your right hand is on top. So when you're pulling in the nets, this is a right-handed dominant culture. Your strength is here so you can be pulling. Jesus says, throw your net to the right side. Okay, right side of my boat, left hand. Guess what? This is not my dominant hand. It's harder. You can't pull this heavy, heavy net in. So, the humiliation, in a way, continues. Oh, and then it gets better. We kind of chuckled at this. We did it at the children, and I know when I was reading it, you guys kind of laughed too, and I do too. Here's Peter, naked, on the boat. He realizes, oh, this is Jesus. I got to get to Jesus. But what does he do? He gets dressed. The only thing I can come up with on this one is he's ashamed of his body. How many of us are self-conscious about our looks? Everyone, right? We're self-conscious, you know, and media and culture, sure, and especially if you're a woman, you know the images that are out there about how we're supposed to look, how we're supposed to be, and men, you're supposed to have those six-pack muscles. That was perfect. That's right. They're just hidden a little bit. And you're all bodybuilders and you're all the quarterback of the football team, right? That's what you're told to be. And so here Jesus calls. And Peter's ashamed of his body, so he throws on clothes, jumps in the water, swims, and finally everybody gets back to shore. Now we're sitting at the table, the picnic table. And have you ever had this experience? I know I did. You're sitting at the table and you know you've done something and you know the other person knows you've done it. And it's like the big elephant in the room and you're kind of hoping you don't get called out. You're standing at your feet, and if you're an extrovert, you're standing at your neighbor's feet. You're just hoping you're not going to get called out because you know you're guilty. Peter feels guilty. Oh, does he feel guilty? He knows he denied Jesus 3 times. Jesus knows Peter denied him 3 times. No secrets here. And so, the guilt is huge. And so, Jesus says, Peter, do you love me? Peter's like, yeah. And he says again, Peter, do you love me? And you know you have been in this place when someone, maybe your spouse, someone you care about, maybe a parent, you know that person, when they've asked you something 3 times, you know that sick, icky, yucky feeling you get in your stomach. You get angry, you want to lash out maybe. And then there's the ultimate. I know in the text it says this is, kind of a precursor to what is going to happen to Peter in his death. But every time I read that text, that last section, about tying your own belt, and someday when we get old, someone will be tying our belts, and we won't have control in our own life. I think that's probably, of all the fears, other than standing here right now this morning, because none of you want to trade places with me, our greatest fear in life is losing our independence and being dependent on someone else to take care of us. None of us want to be vulnerable.